I'm Ross, 35 male. I make my living capturing moments of joy. As a wedding photographer, my job is to frame love stories, to find the quiet, unguarded seconds that define a couple's commitment and turn them into something permanent. But this is the story of a wedding where my camera captured something else entirely, not the beginning of a life together, but the end of a lie. It became the day I realized that sometimes the most important photo you take isn't of a first kiss, but of a last-minute escape. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. I've been a wedding photographer for nearly a decade, and in that time I've learned that every wedding has a secret language. It's in the way a groom's hand trembles when he takes his brides, the flicker of pride in a mother's eyes, or the shared, silent joke between a couple at the altar. My job is to translate that language into images. I didn't plan on this career. I started out as a photojournalist, chasing gritty, hard-hitting stories, but the industry was tough and the pay was tougher. When a friend, short on cash, asked me to shoot her wedding, I reluctantly agreed. What I found surprised me. Amid the chaos and champagne, I discovered an incredible depth of human emotion. I found I had a knack for seeing past the performance of the day and capturing the real, unscripted moments that mattered. My portfolio became a collection of these moments. A father's single tear during the ceremony, a bride kicking off her heels to dance barefoot on the grass, a groom so overcome with emotion he could barely get his vows out. I built my business on authenticity, on capturing the truth of a couple's love story. That's why the call from Victoria Reed's assistant felt so different from the very beginning. It wasn't a bride-to-be, giddy with excitement, calling to see if I was free on her date. It was a crisp, professional voice on the other end of the line, speaking with the detached efficiency of a corporate executive. "Mr. Bailey," she said, her tone leaving no room for small talk, "my name is Alina and I am the personal assistant to Miss Victoria Reed. Miss Reed has seen your portfolio and wishes to engage your services for her wedding to Mr. Peter Russell on May 15th. She paused and I could hear the faint clicking of a keyboard. "The budget is not a concern, we simply require the best." The Reed and Russell families were names everyone in the state knew. They were old money, titans of industry and finance whose influence stretched into politics and high society. A wedding between their two heirs wasn't just a wedding, it was a dynasty in the making, a social event of the year that would be dissected in glossy magazines. Landing this gig would be a major boost for my career, cementing my reputation among the elite. But even as I confirmed my availability, a small knot of unease tightened in my gut. The conversation was entirely transactional, devoid of any of the joy or personality I was used to. My first in-person meeting did little to ease my concerns. It was held at the Reed family estate, a place that felt less like a home and more like a private museum. A long, winding driveway cut through acres of perfectly manicured lawns, leading to a sprawling stone mansion that seemed to watch you as you approached. I was led by a butler through grand hallways with soaring ceilings, past ancestral portraits whose eyes seemed to follow me with aristocratic judgment. I was shown into a formal drawing room where Victoria Reed and Peter Russell were waiting. Victoria was 26 and possessed a stunning, almost intimidating beauty. She was tall and slender with an elegance that was clearly the product of a lifetime of careful cultivation. She was polite, her manners impeccable, but her eyes held a profound distance, as if she were observing the meeting from very far away. Peter, her fiancé, was the textbook definition of a privileged heir. He was handsome in a conventional, clean-cut way, with the easy confidence of a man who had never been told no. He shook my hand firmly, but his attention seemed to be elsewhere, his gaze occasionally drifting towards a stock market ticker playing silently on a television across the room. So, I began, trying to inject some warmth into the sterile atmosphere. "Tell me about your vision for the day. What are the moments that are most important for you to capture?" It's a standard question, my go-to icebreaker. It usually prompts an excited flood of ideas about first looks, heartfelt vows, and candid moments with family. Victoria's response was different. "My father requires a complete and thorough documentation of the event," she said, her voice soft but measured. "He wants every guest photographed, every detail of the decor, every speech. This wedding is the official union of our two families, and the photos must reflect the gravity and significance of that." It was the strangest description of a wedding I had ever heard. She spoke of it like a historical treaty being signed, not the happiest day of her life. There was no mention of love, of joy, of personal memories. It was all about documentation, significance, and most tellingly, her father's requirements. "I understand," I said, choosing my words carefully. We will certainly capture the scale of the event, but what about you too? What moments are special to you personally? The little things, the inside jokes, the things that make you a couple. Peter chuckled a short, dismissive sound. Ross, we're not exactly a little moments kind of couple. Victoria and I have known each other our whole lives. Our families are intertwined. This marriage is the logical next step. It's practical. That's wonderful, Victoria added, though her voice lacked any conviction. She and Peter barely made eye contact throughout the entire meeting. Their interactions were polite but stiff, like two colleagues finalizing the details of a project. When he passed her a document outlining the day's timeline, their fingers brushed, and I saw her subtly pull her hand away, a gesture so small I might have missed it if I wasn't looking for exactly those kinds of details. I pressed Victoria one more time, hoping to find a crack in the polished facade. Victoria, when you look back at these photos in 20 years, what do you want to feel? What do you want to remember? For a brief, fleeting second, something shifted in her eyes. It was a flicker of vulnerability, a hint of a deep, unspoken sadness. It was there and then it was gone, replaced by the same carefully neutral expression. I want to remember that I did what was expected of me, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. I left the Reed estate that afternoon with a heavy feeling. Over the years, I had developed a sort of sixth sense about my clients. I could usually tell within 5 minutes if a couple was truly in love, if they were friends taking a plunge, or if they were a train wreck waiting to happen. But Victoria and Peter didn't fit any of those categories. It felt like I was being hired to photograph a performance, a meticulously staged play where the two lead actors hadn't bothered to learn their lines and didn't believe in the story. My job was to make it look real, to create a beautiful album of lies. And for the first time in my career, I wasn't sure if I was up to the task. The money was life-changing, but the cost felt unsettlingly high. The morning of the wedding arrived with the kind of storybook perfection that photographers dream of. The sky was a flawless pale blue, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the ancient oak trees lining the estate's driveway. As I pulled up to the mansion at 7 a.m., the early morning light cast a golden glow on the stone facade, making it look even more imposing. But the beauty felt cold, like a perfectly preserved artifact in a museum, beautiful to look at, but impossible to connect with. My mission for the morning was to capture the getting ready process, a part of the day I usually loved for its raw, unfiltered emotion. I started in the bridal suite, a vast, opulent room that was larger than my entire apartment. It was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. A team of hair and makeup artists buzzed around, bridesmaids in matching silk robes sipped champagne, and florists made last-minute adjustments to arrangements of white roses that filled the air with a cloying, heavy scent. At the center of it all sat Victoria, a silent, beautiful statue in a gilded cage. She was being pampered and polished, her hair twisted into an elegant chignon, her makeup applied with surgical precision. Through it all, she wore that same distant, detached expression I remembered from our meeting. She wasn't a bride on her wedding day, she was a mannequin being dressed for a window display. I began shooting, my lens focusing on the traditional details. The couture wedding gown hanging like a ghost in the window, the diamond earrings laid out on a velvet tray, the calligraphed invitations. These were the easy shots, the ones that would fill the pages of the society magazines, but my eye kept being drawn back to Victoria. Through my viewfinder, I saw things the casual observer might miss. I saw the way her shoulders tensed every time someone called her Mrs. Russell. I saw the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in her hands as she held a glass of water. There was no joy, no nervous excitement, just a profound sense of resignation. "Victoria, darling, you must smile. It's your wedding day," one of the bridesmaids chirped, a bubbly blonde who seemed to be performing her role with practiced enthusiasm. Instantly, a smile appeared on Victoria's face. It was technically perfect, dazzling white teeth, a graceful curve of the lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes remained empty, haunted. I took the picture, but looking at it on my camera's small screen, it felt fundamentally dishonest. It was a portrait of a hollow woman. Seeking a more genuine moment, I suggested, "Let's get a few shots with your father before he leaves." I knew these father-daughter moments were often the most emotional part of the pre-ceremony ritual. The atmosphere in the room shifted the moment Charles Reed entered. He was a tall, silver-haired man in his late 50s, dressed in a bespoke morning suit. He didn't just walk into a room, he commanded it. His presence was so overwhelming that everyone else, including his daughter, seemed to shrink in comparison. "My beautiful daughter," he boomed, his voice full of possessive pride. He strode over to Victoria, and I raised my camera to capture the embrace. "Hello, father," she replied, and I saw her body stiffen as he approached. He placed his hands on her bare shoulders. It should have been a gesture of paternal affection, but through my telephoto lens I saw the way his fingers dug into her skin, his grip too tight, too controlling. I saw her flinch, a tiny, involuntary movement she quickly tried to hide. "Are you ready for the big day?" he asked, his smile never quite reaching his cold, calculating eyes. "Yes, father," she said, her voice flat. "Everything is proceeding exactly as you planned." "As we planned," he corrected her sharply, though the correction itself felt like an assertion of his own will. "This is your day, Victoria, the day you finally fulfill your obligations and become Mrs. Peter Russell." I took a series of photos of them together. In every single frame, the dynamic was wrong. This wasn't a proud father about to give away his beloved daughter. This was a CEO inspecting his most valuable asset before a merger. Charles Reed stood ramrod straight, a look of smug satisfaction on his face, while Victoria stood beside him, her smile frozen, her eyes pleading for an escape that wasn't coming. The tension was so thick I felt like I could photograph it. Needing a break from the suffocating atmosphere, I made my excuses. "I think I'll go check on the groom's preparations," I announced, and the relief at leaving that room was immense. The groom's suite was a world away. Peter and his groomsmen were lounging in leather armchairs, laughing and sharing stories over a bottle of expensive whiskey. The mood was relaxed and jovial, like a casual Saturday at the country club. Peter himself was the picture of ease, adjusting his cufflinks while discussing a golf trip planned for the following week. He seemed entirely untroubled by the prospect of getting married. "Feeling nervous?" I asked, a standard question for the groom. He let out a short, confident laugh. "Not at all, why would I be? Victoria and I have been on this track since we were kids. This has always been the plan." The plan, the same word Victoria had used. He spoke about his wedding with the same emotional investment one might have for a dentist appointment, a necessary, pre-scheduled event to be gotten through. "Our families have been allies for decades," he continued, as if explaining a business strategy. "It just makes sense, we move in the same circles, we understand the pressures, our values are aligned, it's a perfect match, really." He said it with such conviction that he almost sounded like he believed it. There was no mention of love, passion, or even affection. It was a union of convenience, a strategic alliance solidified through matrimony. It was while photographing the groomsmen that I was approached by a younger man who shared Peter's features, but had a quieter, more thoughtful air about him. "You must be the photographer," he said with a warm, easy smile that was completely different from his brother's confident smirk. "I'm Logan, the spare heir, as they say." "Ross Bailey," I replied, shaking his hand. "Pleasure to meet you." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. "Tell me, have you met Victoria yet this morning?" "I have," I said. "She seems composed." I chose the word carefully. Logan's smile faded, replaced by a look of genuine concern. He was quiet for a moment, studying my face as if trying to gauge whether I could be trusted. "She is composed," he said finally. "She's also one of the kindest, most brilliant people I've ever met. She deserves to be happy." He paused, looking like he wanted to say more, but then he just shook his head. "Never mind, it's not my place." He walked away, leaving me with his cryptic words hanging in the air. His concern for Victoria felt more genuine than anything I had seen from her own fiancé. As I continued to document the morning's preparations, moving between the two camps, the feeling that I was photographing a beautiful, expensive, and elaborate lie grew stronger with every click of my shutter. The entire event felt like a performance, and the bride was trapped in the leading role, locked inside a gilded cage of duty and expectation. The timeline for a high society wedding is a rigid, unforgiving thing. Every minute is accounted for, from the arrival of the florist to the final send-off. The hour before the ceremony was dedicated to the formal family portraits, a ritual I often found to be the most revealing part of the day. Posed photographs have a way of exposing the truth. You can tell a lot about a family by who stands next to whom, who touches and who doesn't, and who is forcing a smile. The Reed and Russell families assembled on the grand lawn behind the mansion, a backdrop of rolling hills and a private lake completing the picture of dynastic wealth. The air was thick with unspoken rules of hierarchy and etiquette. Charles Reed directed the proceedings with the authority of a four-star general, positioning family members as if they were pieces on a chessboard. His wife, a woman who looked as if she'd been carved from ice, stood beside him, her expression a mask of detached elegance. The Russells were equally formal, each member acutely aware of their station. The portraits were exactly as I expected, stiff, perfectly composed, and utterly lifeless. Everyone smiled for the camera, but their eyes were vacant. Victoria and Peter stood together at the center, a handsome couple who looked like they belonged on the cover of a magazine, but there was a visible gap between them, a dead space that no amount of posing could fill. I did my job capturing the images that Charles Reed would expect, the official record of the merger. It felt more like corporate headshots than a family celebration. It was during a brief pause while I was changing a lens that it happened. The families had broken apart for a moment, the adults engaging in polite, hushed conversations. Victoria had drifted away from the main group, standing alone near a rose garden, her posture radiating a profound sense of isolation. She looked overwhelmed, like she was drowning in the sea of expectations. That's when I saw Logan approach her. He moved with a quiet grace that was the opposite of his brother's bold confidence. He said something to her, his voice too low for me to hear over the distance and the murmur of the other guests. And then, the mask shattered. Victoria's face, which had been a carefully controlled canvas of polite neutrality all day, completely transformed. A laugh, a real, uninhibited, joyful laugh burst from her. It wasn't the polite titter of a society heiress. It was a genuine expression of happiness that lit up her entire being. Her head tilted back, her eyes sparkled with a light I hadn't seen before, and for the first time that day she looked truly, breathtakingly beautiful. She playfully touched Logan's arm as they shared the moment, and the way they looked at each other was filled with an intimacy and warmth that was painfully absent between her and Peter. In that single, unguarded second, I saw the woman who was hiding beneath the layers of duty and decorum. This was the real Victoria. My photographer's instincts took over. I raised my camera, focused, and pressed the shutter. Click, I captured it. The moment was frozen in time, Victoria mid-laugh, her face radiant with a happiness so pure it was almost startling. Logan, looking at her not as a future sister-in-law or a strategic asset, but as a person he deeply cared for. It was a photograph that told a completely different story from the one everyone was pretending to believe. The moment was as fleeting as it was beautiful. Victoria, Charles Reed's voice cut through the air like a whip crack. We are ready for the next setup. Stop wasting time. The light in her eyes vanished as if a switch had been flipped. The genuine smile was instantly replaced by the practiced, hollow one. The mask slipped perfectly back into place. She straightened her posture, pulled her hand away from Logan's arm, and returned to her designated spot in the family formation, once again becoming the perfect, obedient daughter. Logan watched her go, a look of deep sorrow on his face, before he too retook his position among the groomsmen. No one else seemed to have noticed the brief exchange. To them, it was just a minor interruption in the day's tightly choreographed schedule, but I had seen it. More importantly, I had captured it. I looked down at the image on my camera's display. It was technically perfect, the lighting, the composition, the focus, but its power wasn't technical, it was emotional. It was a single frame of truth in a day built on falsehoods. As the guests began to file towards the perfectly manicured garden where the ceremony was to take place, I found myself in an impossible situation. My contract, my professional duty was clear. I was there to document the wedding of Victoria Reed and Peter Russell. My job was to be an invisible observer, to record the events as they unfolded, not to influence them. But my conscience was screaming at me. I was now in possession of evidence, a visual confirmation of what I had suspected all along. The bride was desperately unhappy, and her heart clearly belonged to someone other than the man waiting for her at the altar. The string quartet began to play a soft, elegant melody as hundreds of guests in designer outfits took their seats on rows of white chairs. The aisle was carpeted with thousands of white rose petals. Everything was flawless. Everything was a lie. In 30 minutes, Victoria would walk down that aisle and legally bind herself to a man she didn't love, entering a life that wasn't of her own choosing. And I, the photographer, would capture every beautiful, tragic moment of it for posterity. I kept thinking about that photograph. The one moment of pure, unadulterated joy I had witnessed all day. The moment Victoria had been her true self. Holding my camera, I felt the weight of that image. It was more than just a picture, it was a choice. And I realized I had to make one of my own. My discovery had made me more than a photographer, it had made me a witness. The 20 minutes before a wedding ceremony are usually a blur of activity for me. I'm checking light meters, confirming angles with my second shooter, and positioning myself to capture the bride's entrance without being intrusive. It's a period of intense focus, a methodical checklist to ensure I don't miss a single crucial shot. But on this day, my mind wasn't on f-stops or shutter speeds. It was consumed by a single image on my camera and the moral dilemma it presented. I found a quiet spot behind a large, sculpted hedge, away from the mingling guests and the bustling event staff. I needed a moment to think, to let my own internal compass settle. I scrolled through the photos I had taken so far. There were hundreds of them already, beautifully composed shots of the dress, the rings, the flowers. There were the stiff, formal portraits of the two families, smiling with practiced ease. There were photos of Peter and his groomsmen, exuding a careless confidence. And then there were the photos of Victoria. In every single one except for one, she looked like a hostage. Her eyes were vacant, her posture rigid, her smile a beautiful, painful lie. Then I landed on it again, the photo of her with Logan. I zoomed in on her face. The difference was staggering. The woman in this picture was alive. Her eyes were not just smiling, they were dancing. Her entire being radiated a warmth and vitality that was completely absent in every other frame. It was like looking at two different people, the perfect, hollow doll and the vibrant, breathing woman. This photograph wasn't just a candid moment, it was the truth. It was a key that could potentially unlock the gilded cage she was in. My professional code was screaming at me to do nothing. A photographer is a neutral observer. My job is to document reality, not to create it. Interfering would be a catastrophic breach of professional ethics. Charles Reed had hired me and he was paying me an astronomical sum to produce a specific product, a flawless, idealized record of his daughter's society wedding. Showing this photo to Victoria, suggesting that she had a choice, would be an act of professional self-destruction. Reed was a powerful man and he would undoubtedly ruin me. My career, which I had spent a decade building, would be over. I would be blacklisted, known as the photographer who blew up $1 million wedding. But then my human side argued back. Could I really stand by and watch someone walk into a life sentence of unhappiness? I thought about the couples I'd photographed who were genuinely in love. I remembered the palpable joy, the electric connection, the shared laughter that needed no prompting. That was what marriage was supposed to be about. What was about to happen here in this beautiful garden was a perversion of that. It was a business transaction masquerading as a sacrament. Victoria wasn't just unhappy, she looked trapped. The pressure from her father, the weight of generations of expectation, it was a burden no person should have to carry alone. I thought about what Logan had said. She deserves to be happy. He saw it. He knew the truth of who she was and what she was being forced to sacrifice. He was trapped too, forced to stand by and watch the woman he clearly cared for marry his brother. What was my role in all of this? Was I just another hired hand, paid to help construct the facade, or did being a witness come with a responsibility? My camera had shown me a truth that no one else was willing to acknowledge. Did that not obligate me to act? I imagined Victoria in 20 years looking through the wedding album I would create. She would see hundreds of beautiful, empty pictures. She would see the perfect dress, the expensive flowers, the smiling guests. And she would remember the profound misery she felt on the day she gave up her life. The album would. And be a collection of happy memories. It would be a monument to her sacrifice. It would be a beautifully bound book of lies, and my name would be on it. The conflict raged within me. On one side was my livelihood, my reputation, and my professional duty. On the other was a young woman's entire future. It felt impossibly heavy. I had built my brand on capturing authenticity, but here I was being paid to ignore its complete absence. The irony was suffocating. The string quartet shifted to a more expectant melody, a signal that the ceremony was about to begin. Time was up. I had to make a choice. I could delete the photo, put my camera to my eye, and do the job I was paid for. I could walk away and no one would ever know. It would be the safe, smart, professional thing to do. Or I could risk everything. I looked at the photo one last time. I looked at Victoria's radiant, laughing face. It was the face of a woman who was free. And in that moment, my own moral compass finally found its true north. I knew what I had to do. The consequences could be devastating, but the consequence of doing nothing felt so much worse. I wasn't just a photographer anymore. I was the only person who could show Victoria a picture of her own soul before she agreed to sell it. My decision was made. I turned off my camera's display, took a deep breath, and started walking quickly towards the bridal suite. The bridal suite, which had been a hive of frantic activity just an hour earlier, was now eerily silent. The bridesmaids had already gone to take their places for the processional, leaving behind a wake of discarded champagne flutes and makeup brushes. In the center of the room, Victoria stood alone before a towering, full-length mirror. She was a vision in white, the personification of a perfect bride, but the reflection staring back at her was that of a woman on her way to an execution. Her shoulders were slumped, and her eyes held a profound sadness that the expertly applied makeup couldn't conceal. I hesitated at the doorway, my heart pounding against my ribs. This was the point of no return. "Victoria," I said softly, not wanting to startle her. She spun around, and for a second, raw panic flashed in her eyes. "Is it time?" she asked, her voice thin and brittle. "Are they waiting for me?" "Not quite yet," I said, stepping into the room. "You still have a few minutes." I took a steadying breath, knowing my next words could either save her or cost me everything. "Before you go, I wanted to show you something." I walked towards her, raised my camera, and switched on the LCD screen. I navigated to the image, the one of her and Logan laughing. I held it out for her to see. Her breath hitched in her throat. She stared at the small screen, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and recognition. Her carefully constructed composure began to crumble. She reached out a trembling finger and lightly touched the image of her own smiling face, as if greeting a long-lost friend. "Why?" she whispered, her gaze still fixed on the photo. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "I've taken over 500 photos of you today. And this is the only one where you look truly happy." Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to spill over and ruin the makeup artist's masterpiece. She looked up from the camera to meet my gaze, and I could see the internal battle raging within her. "You don't understand," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "This wedding, it's not about my happiness. It has never been about what I want. It's about fulfilling a duty to my family. It's about business alliances and upholding expectations that were set for me before I was even born." "But what do you want, Victoria?" I pressed gently, asking the question I suspected no one had ever bothered to ask her. "Not your father, not Peter, not society. What do you truly want?" She stared at the photograph again for a long, silent moment. I watched as something shifted deep within her. It was a subtle change, but I recognized it from behind my lens. It was the emergence of the woman in the picture, the one who had been buried for so long beneath the weight of obligation. "I want to feel like this," she confessed, her voice cracking as she tapped the screen. "Every day, I want to laugh like this. I want to be myself without having to apologize for it. I want to choose my own life." "Then why don't you?" I asked the simple, terrifying question. "Because I can't," she exclaimed, a note of desperation creeping into her voice. "This is so much bigger than me. To disappoint my father, to break this engagement, to walk away from everything that has been planned for decades, it would cause a catastrophe. It would destroy everything. Or," I countered softly, "it would save you." She looked at me with genuine surprise, as if the idea of her own salvation was a concept she had never been allowed to consider. "Victoria," I continued, feeling a strange sense of calm now that the words were out. "I've photographed over 300 weddings. I've seen what real love looks like. It's not always perfect, but it's real. I've also seen marriages of convenience. I've seen brides who are nervous, brides who are ecstatic, brides who are overwhelmed. But I have never, ever seen a bride who looks as profoundly sad as you do today. It feels like I'm losing myself," she whispered, the tears finally beginning to fall. "Then don't do it," I urged. "You don't have to go through with this." "But how?" she asked, looking around the opulent room as if the walls themselves were the bars of her prison. "I can't just run away. There are 300 guests out there. The ceremony is starting any second." "So show up," I said, the idea crystallizing in my mind even as I spoke it. "Walk down that aisle, stand at that altar. But when the officiant asks you if you take Peter to be your husband for the first time in your life, tell the absolute truth." She stared at me aghast, as if I had suggested she set the mansion on fire. "I couldn't do that. The scandal, the humiliation, my father." "The scandal will fade," I assured her. "The gossip will be forgotten, but a life lived as a lie, that's permanent. Marrying a man you don't love, living a life that someone else designed for you, that pain doesn't go away." A sharp knock on the door made us both jump. "Victoria," her father's impatient voice called from the hallway. "It is time. They are playing your music." Her eyes darted from me to the door and back again. She was trapped between two futures. One was safe, prescribed, and suffocating. The other was unknown, terrifying, and her own. She looked down at my camera one last time, at the single photograph that held the image of her true self. I watched her expression change. The fear and resignation receded, replaced by something new, something I hadn't seen in her before: steel. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet but firm. She wiped her tears away, not with the delicate dab of a bride, but with the determined swipe of a warrior. She stood up straight, her posture no longer slumped with defeat but squared with resolve. The choice had been made. The processional began with flawless military precision. The groomsmen, led by Peter, took their places at the altar. The bridesmaids floated down the aisle in their pastel gowns, their smiles perfectly in place. The string quartet swelled into the classic wedding march, and all 300 heads turned in unison towards the back of the garden. And there she was. Victoria appeared at the end of the aisle, her arm linked through her father's. She looked every inch the society bride she was raised to be, poised, elegant, and breathtakingly beautiful. But I was watching her through my long lens, zoomed in on her face, and I saw what the guests couldn't. The fear was gone. The sadness was gone. In their place was a calm, unwavering determination that seemed to emanate from her. She was no longer a victim being led to slaughter. She was a queen about to address her court. She walked down the aisle with a slow, deliberate grace, her steps measured and confident. Charles Reed, oblivious to the storm brewing beside him, beamed with proprietary pride, nodding at business partners and political allies in the front rows. Peter waited at the altar, his confident smile firmly in place, ready to receive his prize. When they reached the front, Charles lifted his daughter's veil. "I am so proud of you," he whispered, a sentiment my discreet microphone picked up clearly. "I know you are, Father," Victoria replied, her voice steady and clear. "But today I am choosing to be proud of myself." He gave her a puzzled look but had no time to question it. He placed her hand in Peter's, kissed her cheek, and took his seat in the front row, a king watching the final move in his master plan. The minister, a distinguished-looking man with a gentle voice, began the ceremony. "Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God and this company to join together this man, Peter, and this woman, Victoria, in holy matrimony." I moved around the periphery, my camera shutter clicking softly, documenting the scene. My heart was hammering in my chest. I had lit the fuse, but I had no idea how big the explosion would be. I watched Victoria's hands, they were perfectly still as she held her bouquet. I watched her eyes, they never wavered from the minister. The ceremony moved forward. Peter delivered his vows with practiced sincerity, speaking of their shared history, their aligned values, and the strong future they would build together. It sounded more like a corporate mission statement than a declaration of love. When it was Victoria's turn, she spoke of duty, of family, and of respect. She chose her words with incredible care, honoring the commitment she had been raised to uphold while never once using the word love. And then the moment arrived, the climax of the entire performance. "Peter," the minister said, his voice resonating through the silent garden, "do you take Victoria to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part?" "I do," Peter said, his voice strong and confident. The minister turned to Victoria. "And do you, Victoria, take Peter to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do you part?" A profound silence fell over the garden. The only sound was the gentle rustle of the wind in the trees and the frantic beat of my own heart. Every eye was on Victoria. She looked at Peter, then turned her head slightly to look at her father in the front row. Finally, her gaze swept over the groomsmen and found Logan. I saw him give her the smallest, almost imperceptible nod of support. I saw her draw a deep breath, pulling strength from that silent connection. "No," she said, her voice wasn't a whisper, it was clear, firm, and unequivocal. "I do not." A collective gasp rippled through the 300 guests. It was a sound I will never forget. Peter's face turned ashen, his confident smile dissolving into a mask of pure shock. "Victoria, what are you doing?" he hissed, his voice a frantic whisper. But Victoria was done whispering. She turned to face the stunned crowd, her voice ringing out with a power no one there had ever heard from her before. "I am telling the truth," she announced. "The truth that I should have spoken months or even years ago. This marriage is not a celebration of love, it is a business contract. It is about family legacy, financial partnerships, and societal expectations. And I refuse to sign my life away as part of a deal." Charles Reed shot to his feet, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. "Victoria, that is enough. Stop this spectacle at once." "No, Father," she said, looking directly at him, her voice unwavering. "I will not stop. I will not be silent, and I will not pretend for one more second. I have spent my entire life being the perfect daughter, the perfect fiancée, playing the part you wrote for me. But it is not a perfect life if it is not my choice." She then turned back to Peter, her expression softening with genuine regret. "Peter, I am truly sorry for this public humiliation. You are a decent man and you deserve to be with someone who loves you with her whole heart. But I am not that person. We both know this marriage was arranged for us. We both know we are settling for a life of comfortable convenience instead of searching for real happiness." She gently pulled the enormous diamond ring from her finger and placed it in his limp hand. The garden erupted into absolute chaos. Guests were on their feet, their shocked whispers turning into a loud buzz of scandal. Charles Reed was trying to push his way through the crowd towards the altar, his face contorted with rage. I saw Victoria's mother slump in her chair, having fainted dead away. Through it all, I kept shooting, my camera capturing the beautiful, perfect wedding as it spectacularly imploded. Victoria raised her hand for silence, and surprisingly, she got it. "I am sorry for the disruption," she said, her voice carrying over the commotion. "But I am not sorry for choosing myself. I hope one day you will understand that choosing your own happiness is not a selfish act. It is a necessary one." Her gaze found Logan one last time, and the smile that spread across her face was the same radiant, free smile from my photograph. And I hope that when I do marry, it will be for love. It will be to someone who sees the real me and who makes me laugh. With that final declaration, she turned, gathered the skirt of her expensive gown, and walked back up the aisle. She wasn't a runaway bride fleeing in shame. She was a woman walking calmly and deliberately toward her own freedom. The implosion of the Reed-Russell wedding became the society scandal of the decade. For a few moments, the scene at the altar was one of frozen disbelief, then absolute pandemonium. Charles Reed, his face a mask of fury, bellowed his daughter's name. Guests swarmed together in agitated clusters, voices buzzing with gossip and speculation. Peter stood at the altar, looking utterly bewildered, holding the rejected diamond ring as if it were a live grenade. I kept my camera moving, documenting the raw, unfiltered chaos. These weren't the photos my client had paid for, but they were the real story. The most important moment, however, happened at the back of the garden. As Victoria reached the end of the aisle, a figure broke away from the stunned wedding party at the altar. It was Logan. He walked purposefully towards her, his face mixture of concern, admiration, and something that was undeniably love. "Victoria," he called out. She stopped and turned. When she saw him, her tense expression melted away, replaced by that luminous smile I had now come to recognize as her true self. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice filled with a tenderness that had been absent all day. "I'm better than all right," she replied, her voice shaking slightly but filled with a new, powerful resolve. "I'm free." "What will you do now?" he asked, looking at her as if she was the only person in the world. "I have no idea," she said with a laugh that sounded like music. "For the first time in my entire life, there is no plan, there are no expectations. It's both terrifying and absolutely wonderful." Logan reached out and without hesitation took her hand in his. "Would you like some company while you figure it out?" A shadow of doubt crossed her face. "Are you sure? Your family, my family, they will never forgive you for this, for choosing me." "It's the only choice that makes sense," he said simply, his grip on her hand tightening. I raised my camera and captured that too. The final, perfect shot of the day, Victoria and Logan hand in hand, turning their backs on the wreckage of the life that had been planned for them and walking towards an unknown future together. It was a far more honest and hopeful picture of love than any posed photo at an altar could ever be. The fallout was immediate and immense. Charles Reed publicly disowned Victoria, issuing a cold corporate statement about his disappointment. The billion-dollar business merger between the two family empires collapsed spectacularly. For months, the society pages were filled with breathless speculation. Yet through the grapevine, I later heard that after a year of bitter silence, Charles Reed quietly reached out to his daughter. Apparently, seeing her genuinely happy had slowly eroded his anger, reminding him that he was a father before he was a CEO. Peter, as it turned out, was more embarrassed than heartbroken. The public humiliation stung his pride, but privately he was relieved. 6 months later, he was engaged again, this time to a woman he had met on his own terms, someone who shared his passion for golf and finance. By all accounts, they were genuinely happy. As for me, I fully expected my career to be over. I braced myself for lawsuits from the Reed family and for my reputation to be destroyed. Who would ever hire the photographer who not only witnessed but actively encouraged the implosion of a wedding? But the opposite happened. The story of the runaway bride and the mysterious photograph became a sort of urban legend in the wedding industry. Instead of angry calls from vengeful billionaires, my phone began ringing with calls from a new type of client. They were couples who had heard the story and wanted a photographer who valued truth over tradition, who cared more about capturing authentic moments than creating a perfect fantasy. My business didn't just survive, it thrived. I became known as the photographer who shoots from the heart. A year to the day after the wedding that never was, I received a phone call from an unfamiliar number. "Ross, it's Victoria." I was stunned. "Victoria, it's so good to hear your voice. How are you?" "I'm wonderful," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Truly, deeply happy. I'm calling because Logan and I are getting married next month, and there's no one else we'd want to photograph it." I felt a lump form in my throat. I would be honored. "I should warn you," she laughed, "it won't be anything like the last wedding you attended for me. We're doing it in the backyard of our new house. 50 guests max, no seating chart, no 5-course meal, but I can promise you one thing, it will be real." "Those are my favorite kind," I told her. The wedding of Victoria and Logan Russell was everything the first one wasn't. It was small, intimate, and so full of joy it felt like the whole world was celebrating with them. Victoria wore a simple, elegant dress she'd bought at a small boutique. Logan wore a suit he already owned. They wrote their own vows, which they spoke through happy tears. The photos from that day are some of the best I have ever taken. They capture a love that is honest, unguarded, and freely chosen. My favorite image is of Victoria, head thrown back in a full, joyous laugh, while Logan looks at her with an expression of pure adoration. It is the same uninhibited happiness I had captured in that one secret photograph a year before, the one that had set them all free. That first photo, the one of Victoria and Logan on the lawn, now hangs framed in my office. It's a constant reminder of the power of a single moment of truth. It reminds me that my job isn't just to capture what a wedding looks like, but what love feels like. Victoria and Logan are still married, living a quiet, happy life far from the society P. Ages, every year on their anniversary, they send me a simple photo of the two of them, still laughing, still choosing each other. And I am reminded that sometimes the most beautiful story isn't the one that was planned, but the one that was brave enough to begin.